you for dialing in, participating in today's AT&T hosted voice service review of the Baum Act and 911 compliance. Sort of our overview and agenda for the day will be, I'll take a few opening remarks, then we'll pass the baton, so to speak, presentation-wise, over to David Chambers, who's with ClearSpan, and David will review some information that's relevant to the topic at hand. And then I'll come back at the end and probably wrap us up. As you know, this is an ongoing sequence of meetings occurring on Tuesdays and Thursdays from now to the end of the year. Tuesdays at 1 o'clock Eastern and Thursdays at 2 o'clock Eastern. As we proceed in the weeks ahead, we'll start to evolve the curriculum a little bit so that we deal with some of the more what I'll call cases and situations you may encounter. But at this point in time, here going into the second week, in preparation for the new release of OpEasy, which is actually going to begin to occur on some of the servers this week, which will be complete on all servers by November 1. So when you come to work on November 2, the version of OpEasy that you'll be using as an administrator with HVS will be a different one. And contained within it will be a new field and some new capabilities we're going to show you and talk about here today that now allow you to manage what's known as your dispatchable location in 911 parlay phrase directly from OpEasy. As many of you know, and I'll give you just a preamble before David jumps in, there's a new federal law that went into effect at the end of last year. AT&T's hosted voice service is what we call a non-fixed interconnected voice service. Hopefully you'll never have to remember that, but it means that we have until January 6th of 2022 to be compliant with the new law. Throughout 21, we've worked with many customers independently to get them credentials into the portal that actually maintains the information, what the emergency locations are and how to associate those emergency location details with a particular telephone number. But as we've evolved through the year, we did some development here that will now sort of simplify that for an administrator and allow you to do everything through one common pane of glass or through OpEasy. Again, AT&T's role and job is to make sure that our customers have access to the capability to become compliant with the new law. It's really, unfortunately, the customer, your users, your business's responsibility to manage and maintain that data. So I think we're at a point in time where we've migrated many users throughout 2021. There are some that haven't completed the process, and now we're automating that and making it even simpler. And that's what today's discussion will be about, what you need to do to prepare over the next couple of days to create information and obtain it, and then we'll associate that with users once the new code is actually in production, which I said would happen on no later than the night of November 1 until November 2, we'll be able to start to update this information. So with that as an introduction, we appreciate you all being here today. We appreciate your business. And I'm going to turn it over to David to let him begin the tutorial.
Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you're located. Like Mike said, I'm David Chambers. I'm a service architect for ClearSpan that we support the AT&T HVS platform. So basically what I'll cover today is a very brief overview of the FCC 19-76 requirement, which is made of two parts. Baum is one of the more significant portions. Then we'll go into defining what a dispatchable location is, basically where you want to tell the first responders to go find the 911 caller. And then I'll walk you through the OpEasy integration that we've done with the Intrado ERS, Emergency Routing Service. And then finally, we'll discuss next steps, whether you've done anything with the Intrado Emergency Routing Service or not. There's still steps to be taken as we progress. Also, as Mike mentioned, as we progress in these series of meetings, this first one is known as segment 1, which is basically an introduction to those pieces I just described. Two other segments are going to come into play to cover various use cases depending on what endpoint is originating the call, whether it's a desk phone, a nomadic user, a mobile device, MS Teams, and also some of the unique attributes of being able to provision those subscribers.
All right, David, you still there? David, I think you're muted. There you go.
Yeah, nice keyboard. So let me get on with Baum. This was created by the FCC in August of 2019, and like Mike said, it was introduced, became into effect first part of January of last year for fixed devices. And I won't go through all the verbiage, but basically, you can think of Kerry's Law is a requirement to allow a user to make a 911 call without having to dial any prefix digits. And also to get notification to someone that a 911 call has been made. The Baum Act is basically providing an accurate dispatchable location that is conveyed to the first responders that consist of the street address, but that was augmented by this new requirement to be more than just the street address that was used in E911. This is the advanced 911. So if you're in a multi-story building, you know, what floor or maybe what part of that floor that the caller is resident. And so the compliance date for fixed was January 6th of last year. The upcoming date for non-fixed is January 6th of 2022. Non-fixed, think of it as your SIP phone. You can unplug it from one RJ45, walk to a different floor, plug it in, and still have the same telephone number. We have soft clients. You can put them on notebooks and go from one Wi-Fi access point to another, floor to floor. And then lastly, you have soft clients that go on mobile devices. So trying to get the correct and most accurate dispatchable location is really the key to this. It also should be noted that several states have their own unique 911 requirements. And they, for example, a state may require a dispatchable location to be limited to a square footage of a floor. But more importantly, myself and ClearSpan, we are not lawyers, so we highly recommend that you work with your organization. If you have a public safety group, if you have regulatory advisors or counsel, to make sure that everyone is aligned, because this whole thing is really about a company trying to facilitate the best response for a 911 call and also to protect themselves from any liabilities of the first responders not showing up at the correct location or contacting the wrong first responders to respond to the call. So the dispatchable location. So all 911 calls, whether it's from a mobile device, a nomadic device, a desk phone, they all are delivered to the hosted voice platform, and we forward those calls over to the Intrado Emergency Routing Service. It's that routing service that selects the correct PSAP, public safety answering point, your police station, fire station, and such, and provides not only the call to those first responders, but also the dispatchable location. So an example of a dispatchable location is here on the left-hand side. And you'll see that not only is it the postal address, but it also includes some additional information so that the first responders can know precisely where to go within that building. So that's effectively the dispatchable location. And then in the Intrado database, they use what a label called emergency response location. It's just a name that is an index into their database that contains all the dispatchable location entries. So when a call is made, we make sure that the URL is referenced in that call, delivered to Intrado. Intrado dips into that database with that index, selects the correct PSAP, sends the call to that PSAP, and also the dispatchable location to that PSAP. So I'll pause just for a second. Any questions so far? All right, so again, when a call is made. So going on to the integration with Intrado. So some of the benefits of using OpEasy to integrate to the Intrado ERS service is that there are multiple types of accounts within the ERS. There's 3 levels of accounts. In some cases, you would use a level 2 account, for example, Microsoft Teams, or a level 3 sub account if you're doing soft phones or desk phones. OpEasy automatically selects the correct account for you. It also facilitates URL provisioning, the emergency response location provisioning, and the ERS subscriber provisioning individually or by bulk. The ERS also does MS Team provisioning for the Intrado ERS service. There's still the component that we'll cover in a future presentation of the Microsoft List provision. And then also the call routing and payload delivery in order that we get the correct information to Intrado to do that data dip into the correct location. Some other aspects of that is we've enabled this dispatchable location and assigning those locations to users or to devices at all 3 levels, an EA and a GA and a DA. However, a department admin is limited to just assigning those URLs that represent dispatchable locations to users. Enterprise administrators and group administrators you can assign the rights for them to be able to create, add, modify, delete ERLs. So from that, there's a new section that you'll discover once you have the new release 21.1 with the label of 911 services. With that, if you go in the next layer down, you'll find emergency routing service. That will lead you to the ability to do emergency response location management. It's important to note that you need to build your ERLs first, and then that will allow you to assign URLs to devices. So in this example, we're going to go through an example of add an URL. This will be the screen that's presented if you're doing it through the GUI versus an import. The URL name is freeform. However, so it is highly recommended that you have some sort of agreed upon format for your collective team, and that the URL be something intuitive, which I'll show you in just a moment. The civic address that's listed there is street, house number, street, common postal information, but it's the location here field that provides that additional information, like which floor, what part of the floor, that sort of thing. And it will be sent with the 911 call to the PSAP. The description is a field that is there just for your convenience to give more meaning to the location and the URL name. the routing options below. You have the choice of routing the 911 call to the PSAP, routing it to a security desk if you have a security team that is qualified to take 911 calls, and you can also conference the call from the PSAP to the security desk through the ERS conferencing. And I'll go into the next fields there, an example of filling that out. So again, if you had room numbers or building numbers, a lot of our retail customers have store numbers. You could simply put the number of the store or the number of the store and a name for it. The postal address, you'll see. In this case, we're going to pass to the PSAP the fact that this caller is on the second floor in suite 200. And by the way, to the admins that are looking at this, they'll recognize that as the engineering lab area. So again, description does not go with the call, location does. Also in this case, I've selected conference. So when a 911 call is made, it comes to HVS, we send it to the Intrado ERS. ERS delivers that to the PSAP and also conferences that call back to the security desk that's been identified here in the security desk DID. Right above that, you'll see email notification. So when a 911 call is made and received by Intrado, Intrado will send one or more emails to notify your admins or people of choice. And it's also highly recommended to use email addresses that get translated from email to text. So in the event you're away from your desktop, you'll still get text messages about the event. Notification display, and this will be described in more detail in the documentation that comes out with the release. Yeah, we just wanted to give you sort of an insight in the ability to ask some questions relative to what's being presented. The notification display, when we send that call to the security desk, do you want the original display or do you want it to say something like engineering lab? Also, the security desk can be muted so they can just listen in, or unmuted so that they can also participate in the conversation. So any questions relative to creating an URL? Okay. So this is still in the export. This is where you can export the spreadsheet to do bulk import of that information. I'll show you the spreadsheet here in a moment. And then the next screen is where you would go to import that spreadsheet to automatically provision the URLs and or assign URLs to devices. So to the spreadsheet. So I just want to give a view of the total tab for URL records. So you'll find a new tab in your export import spreadsheet. Each one of those tabs, this is not intended to be an eye chart. So I've broken them down to where I can sort of expand the field so it's readable. The first column, status, is again, when it's executed, whether it was executed successfully or not. The command, you have the option of add, modify, and delete. The URL name, again, it's that intuitive label that you're going to use, that Intrado will use to dip into the dispatchable database. In the URL ID, you please leave that blank. It has to be system-wide unique within ERS. And so we're leveraging the Intrado ERS capability of machine-to-machine generation of that ID. When you export, if URLs are built, you'll be able to see the ID, but just let the machines take care of that for you. This is your location information. Again, street address, all the way down to country, and then location. Again, location is going to go with the 911 call, and a description, which will not go with the 911 call. And you'll see the number of character limits here at the top row. In the location information, you'll hear people having recommendations to keep that to 20 characters or less to be able to be completely displayed on the screen of the CAD system for the PSAP. But that's somewhat of a older equipment limitation. The newer CAD systems do not have that limitation. And the last part of the spreadsheet is the delivery method. Again, you can send it just to the PSAP, just to the security desk, or conference them in. The custom callback number, typically that is not needed. That would only come into play if you had an extension only user and you wanted to put a unique custom callback DID associated with that extension user. For example, it could be a receptionist or a guard station or something along that line. And again, just for extension only users, you always want to use, if the device has a DID, you always want to use that DID so that in the event the call gets dropped, the PSAP can call the caller back directly. Next one is the notification. Again, it's this field I think is approximately 1,000 bytes long. So you can put in several email addresses, email and also email to text IDs, or you can just create a distribution group within your own facility and manage it from that perspective. If you're going to send the call to the security desk or conference them in, the DID for that security desk, the notification that you want the security desk to see on their calling party name, and whether you want the security desk muted or not. Again, the error response is only if there's a problem with validating the address. I should say that whether you do this individually or you do it in bulk with an import, the postal address that was on the previous page will be validated against a master street address guide, MSAG. And if it's not found within the MSAG, it will be rejected. So any questions on the OpEasy? That is no. So this is now assigning, now that you've created the URLs or created your dispatchable locations and assigned URLs, now you can go and add a URL to a phone, to a device. So in this case, under phones, we've added a new field here. This other information already exists. And in this example, there's only one URL that is listed in this dropdown. Depending on how many URLs you've created for your enterprise, that dropdown will be populated by all your enterprise URLs. Once you navigate there, if you have a very large number, you can start typing the first 3 letters or so of the URL ID, and it will navigate directly to that for your selection. So any questions about assigning URLs to devices? The one thing I would say is that in this case, you're assigning the emergency response location, the URL, that represents a dispatchable location to a device. You will see in advanced presentations that orientation will change to a user for in special cases. But in what you've just been presented, it's at a device level. So if I have a desk phone in my corporate headquarters office and I have a desk phone in my home office, they both have the same 10-digit telephone number, but they represent 2 different dispatchable locations, and also they exist in 2 different PSAPs. So what's under the hood, what's taking place here is creating the ability to identify the correct PSAP and to provide the correct dispatchable location, even though it just has a 10-digit DID associated with it. So next steps. From our perspective, our recommendation is step back and look at your organization and figure out how many dispatchable locations you really have to deal with. If you have a small retail facility, for example, that's probably only a single dispatchable location, only a single URL. If you're in a multi-story building, a 5-story building, that's at a minimum 5 URLs, because you want to tell the first responders which floor, at least which floor the call came from. And then also start creating your URLs, your naming convention for the URLs to associate with each one of those dispatchable locations that you and the team have identified. And that will create a list for you that can be imported into OpEasy in bulk, and it's very in a very lightweight effort. If you have extension-only devices, you have to think about, okay, there's no DID to call that phone back. So if the PSAP needs to call the caller back, where would that call go? And that's where that custom callback field comes into play. Again, it could be your security desk. It could be someone that's in the area that's responsible. Again, your choice. Identify who will receive notifications. That's the email and texting. Again, you can either put the emails in OpEasy individually, or you can create a distribution list in your own email solution and distribute it that way. Again, highly recommended to use an email to text capability when you can. All right, so there's Mike James spoke on this at the very beginning. Some of you have already been provisioning dispatchable locations, URLs, and devices or telephone numbers in the Intrado ERS. Some of you have not. So the top portion is relative to if you have already worked in the Intrado ERS. From a ClearSpan, from an HVS perspective, the Intrado ERS is going to remain the master reference for the ERL data, including dispatchable locations. So in HVS, OpEasy/ClearSpan will become the master reference for the ERS subscribers. So even though you have subscribers already identified in the ERS, when OpEasy does a synchronization with the ERS, it will pull the URLs from the ERS and store those into HVS, and it will push subscriber information from HVS into the ERS. So what that translates to, before you do the sync with OpEasy, export the subscribers in bulk out of the ERS, put them in the format for the OpEasy import, and import the subscribers. That way you will not lose any data. And I think that was my last slide. Yep. So any questions, comments?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
So I think I missed the first few minutes. When is this actually going to take place?
The compliance for the non-fixed VoIP provider is January 6th of 2022.
David, I'll take that. I think Latoya's asking when will the code be ready? And Latoya, it's Mike. The last server will update on the evening of November 1st. So by the time everybody comes to work next week on November 2nd, all servers will be updated. Some of the servers, and I don't know which customers are on which servers, will actually be updated this week. So the last server will be done November 1st. That's the point. And by November 2nd, all HVS customers will have this new OpEasy release with these new fields and capabilities.
And hey, David, you may want to explain too that we're going to advance these webinars to a bit more tactical in nature once all of the servers are updated to 21.1.
Yeah, I did touch on that at the beginning, John, that we would be advancing to different use cases and different provisioning requirements. So this one, as you would see is referenced as segment 1. So the plan is to have 2 other segments, one to cover the device types that can originate in 911 call, everything from fixed to nomadic and mobile and soft clients like Communicator, Microsoft Teams.
Right, so guys, it's Mike James again. It's a quiet group. I would expect a little more interaction and questions, but if we don't have them, that's fine. I think what we've tried to do today, is just communicate broadly that this new release is going to be available, and it's actually going to ease this migration and update that needs to be occurring to be compliant with the new law. And that the action item, right, what's the homework from here, is to begin to think about how, if you haven't already begun, to organize your response locations, right? Some buildings may be really simple. I just have one. Right? It's street number, street name, and it's 8 or 9 people. If I walk through the front door, I could see everybody. Others, depending on where you are, whether you're, let's just say, your university setting, you may be in a particular building on this, and every building may have a room number, and you may need to create a dispatchable location for room 201, 202, 203, 204 to get that granular. So that's the way I need you to start thinking right now is what are those, how am I going to organize this additional detail called dispatchable location by building and location so that I'm prepared next week to begin to create those locations. And then as David has indicated, with the next step after we've created them, if you haven't done so already, is associate those with devices. I think the other homework item is to talk amongst yourselves internally about this notification process, right? And I think it takes 2 aspects. One is, I'm going to strongly support what David's already said, obviously. Build a distribution list inside your email server. Use that distribution list as, the email address you want the notifications to go to. And then you can add to that and change that easily within your mail servers. And by the way, as we all know, that can be phone number at sms.carrier.text or something like that, whatever Verizon or AT&T texting would allow. But so that you can also get them delivered to your mobile device. Just think about that. And then I think the other component, which Ray Baum introduced, and David brought this up a moment ago, was I think the default is let's send all the calls just to the PSAP like it's been done for the last 25 or 30 years, right? But we did introduce this idea of a 3-way call, right? The ability to notify a what I'll call a security desk and include them in that 911 call. I think that's a great feature. I'm not sure how many people are going to want to take advantage of it, but be aware that that's an option on this notification. And then I think the other component that David pointed out, that's a radio button to pick and make a selection, is do I want it to go to my own security desk? And I just want to make a comment there. AT&T doesn't want these phone calls going to a security desk if it's not what we call a NENA certified PSAP. We have large universities that have their own public safety access point and police departments. In that case, that may make sense. But I think for the majority of us, the right answer is send it to the PSAP and only include your security desk if you want them to be the 3-way call. So I'm going to pause there again, see if there's any questions around the that.
Yeah. I do. This is Rob Levos from Elro. When is I think it's 933 going to be active? I tried that last week and it didn't want to work from my desk phone.
Well, if you already have Intrado ERS credentials, right, and are using the Intrado database natively today, and you have associated that telephone number in ERS, then 933 should work. If it does not work, let's work offline to get an Intrado ticket open and understand why.
Okay, that's what all right. I kind of guessed that. Thanks.
Yeah, and I can get you that help desk number if you don't have it handy, or the email address for Charles Help Desk. But that's a good point. Let me just spin on that a minute. Once we've implemented this, right, and you've loaded response locations called URLs, a new fancy term for us, and you've associated that URL with a telephone number, and in this case specifically, David would want me to say a device. Once that device is loaded, you can walk right over to that phone and type 933, and it should get an interactive voice response unit, an IVR, that will play back for you exactly what the dispatchable location of that device is. So that's, you don't have to make test 911 calls is what we've created, right? It's the ability to verify the data is accurate if you need to. I'm certainly not suggesting that 1,000 device locations go around to all 1,000 phones and check them. We typically would not do that during our implementation, during installation and test and turn up. We would pick a handful, maybe 10 to 20 to validate, but we certainly wouldn't do all 1,000. But if you ever have a question about what is the dispatchable location for that device, there's this new tool that we were just talking about called dialing 933 that'll play it back.
I have another question. So I was looking at the screen and Davey, you were sharing, I guess it was like an Excel document where the customer would put all of that information in. Is that going to be part of the database workshop? Is that when this information we would request this information from the customer? If it's a HVS new start, let me say that.
Yeah, Tori, I think that's the key. During the new start process, the answer will be yes.
Okay.
That will be an additional format or piece of document that will need to be populated. And for those who are already HVS customers, many that are on this call, of course, that spreadsheet will be able to be downloaded right from OpEasy, and then you can use it to bulk import back in if you want to assign URLs to lots of devices at once, as opposed to going screen by screen by screen.
Okay, so if they already, so basically what you're telling me, for example, one of the customers I have, they already have some information loaded in Intrado. So the customer would need to do an export from Intrado and then import that into the new section within OpEasy, correct?
Just the subscribers, correct.
Just the subscribers, okay.
The
So
URLs and that other information will be done with a sync function, okay?
Okay. All right.
And then an additional point, this presentation and the others as we go forward will be posted on the website.
And I went on the website because I thought the training was done last week. I was unable to locate them. So were the previous training sessions not recorded, or is this the first one that was recorded?
I'll have to check into that.
Okay,
Yeah, I thought last Thursday's was posted, but we can verify that. Yeah.
It is out there on the AT&T admin training.
Okay, thank you, John.
And I'm sorry, I know I'm asking a lot of questions, but I know I'm going to get asked a lot of questions from my customers. I'm a PM for AT&T, for those of you who don't know. So I thought that fast. Never mind. If it comes back, then I will reach out. Never mind.
No worries. Anyone else have any questions?
There's a question in the chat that I'd also like to know about.
Okay.
Communicator. Hey, David, you want to jump into that at a high level? And Andrew, we are going to, advance these sessions beyond this preliminary discussion, but to deal specifically with clients.
Yeah, so this is really an entry into the more advanced session, but I'll be glad to touch on this. So with Communicator, you have Communicator that can run on a notebook, on a PC, and a communicator that can run on a mobile device. For the one that runs on the PC, Intrado has a widget that's called Location Manager that can detect changes in either your network IP address and or your BSSID for wireless access points. BSSID is like a MAC address for an access point. So as it moves, as it detects that movement, if those devices are pre-mapped in the ERS database, it will just automatically tell the location manager, will inform the ERS that this 10-digit telephone number is now in this location. If it goes to a BSSID that it does not have pre-populated, it's going to prompt the user and ask for a valid address of where that user is. And then that response will be, again, validated against the MSAG database and then accepted or rejected by the ERS. If it's rejected, it will re-prompt the user for dispatchable location address. For the mobile device, when a 911 call is made, communicator should be configured, unless that's been changed. The preferred configuration is for communicator to always use the native dialer for 911 calls if the cellular service is available. And the reason we do that is that both Google and Apple have created a partnership with a company called Rapid SOS that facilitates advanced location information for that mobile device. In the event that you do not have cellular service, we still want that 911 call to go somewhere, just as a fail-safe. So communicator, no cell service, but I have Wi-Fi. It will deliver the call to HVS. We'll realize that it's a mobile device and forward that to the ERS, and the ERS will handle that with their emergency call routing call center. So it's really a fail-safe from a mobile phone perspective. Did that answer your question?
I'm going to jump on that a little bit more for Andrew. That means the last option goes to a live operator. Since we don't know where you are and we came in over a Wi-Fi antenna, fundamentally you're going to have somebody answer the phone live and say, where are you, before we send it off to a PSAT. That's the intermediary step for a iOS or Android sort of mobile phone that has the client that does not have access to the native carrier antenna, right? So as you guys can tell, this gets pretty complicated pretty quick with nomadic devices and wireless devices. But the good message is it's cared for. We hope we've worked with our providers and solution architects to get us to a solution that works for all these scenarios. That's also why the FCC gave non-fixed interconnected VoIP providers an additional year to implement and deploy this solution. So more to come, and hopefully that was a good start, Andrew.
Any other questions?
Mike, I have one last question. So for this process, customers that are on HVS, how will they get notifications about this process? Because I have one customer who got the notification, but all of her sites, I don't even think any of her sites have been moved into Intrado. The project is ongoing at this moment. So how would that work?
So everybody that's new and still onboarding is going to follow this new process we're talking about right now, Latoya. I've already had that conversation with one of your peers today. So I think that if you're work in process and you haven't gotten to the point that you're, gotten to the Intrado credentials, we're just going to follow what we're talking about here, and that's why everybody was invited to these calls to help bring them along. I think what I would like to do is to tell you that we have a way to synchronize the old people who did this manually, if I may, earlier in the year, so that they can make use of this new capability in OpEasy, so they won't have to remember 2 sets of passwords and to go do this every time they make a change. We'll talk about how we synchronize and do all that in another call, but that capability is there.
So, but will the customers be notified that the information's been synced over to OpEasy?
It will not be synced until they push the sync button. But yes, we can do a separate notification to those customers if needed.
Yeah, I feel like that would be a good idea to notify already existing HVS customers, hey, this is a change that we made, and now you have this option to control your emergency routing via App Easy rather than going straight into the Intrado portal.
Understood, and that's why all 7,000 people got emails over the last 2 weeks about this call and these changes. But I'm happy to do that individually.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Well, I appreciate everybody's time today. Hopefully this is helpful. We've certainly got a few minutes left if there's lingering questions in the back of your mind. Again, I think, you know, I'll repeat what I've said. Walk away from this today if it's all new news to you, right? Beginning to think about your buildings within your entity, no matter whether that's commercial enterprise on a retail site or state and local government or a place of higher education, whatever the case may be. K through 12, we got customers of all types here. And how you would want to organize these response locations. That's the initial thinking. In what that sort of naming convention may be that has meaning to you, right? So that when you pull them up, you know what they are. And then we will move forward together over the next week to define those and then associate those with the phones. All right, David, I'll just turn it back. But anybody have any last questions before we conclude the call? We've certainly got a few minutes.
Quiet group, Mike.
Yeah, I see that. Eddie, did you have a question? I may have messed up looking back here at the chat. Maybe not. All right. Well, thank you all again for your time and for your participation. Again, reminder, Thursday, day after tomorrow, 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We'll pick this back up. We certainly don't, believe that everybody has time in their life to do this every week for 2 hours, on Tuesdays and Thursdays each day. So again, back to the point made earlier, we'll verify that this is being posted, but the intent was to post these sessions in a recorded format out on the website. So for either remedial purposes or for those who weren't able to make a call and wanted to go back over the material, they certainly could.
Hey, Mike.
Yes, sir, David.
A couple more, two or three more questions that came in on chat. One of them was relative to URLs for remote users. And again, the remote users somewhat depends on the type of device that they're working with remotely. If it's a desktop, as an example, you would put Location Manager on that desktop. Mm-hmm. And then that would define a postal address. Once the Location Manager came up, they would ask for the postal address. That would be sent to the ERS to be validated and either accepted or rejected and reprompt the customer. So in that case, the rule set's a little different. The provisioning itself is just the 10-digit number, not the line port information. So again, we're taking a lot of complexity out of your hands because of the 10 different sources of 911 calls and whether they're on net or off net. That gives you a complex of around 40 different elements to manage, depending if it's this type of device, whether it's on net or off net. So hopefully that answered that question.
Well, I'm going to embellish it a little bit further. If somebody picked up a hard phone and took it home and plugged it in, you're going to want to define an URL for that home address.
Yep.
That's the short answer there, right?
And that will be line port.
That's correct. But I'm just adding a little clarity to the desktop client version. Good question.
And James had a question about Location Manager. I'm sorry, before we go on to the Location Manager, any other questions or comments on the previous topic? Okay. So James, you received an email from Intrado about installing LM.
Yes, I did. I'm not sure exactly what I'm supposed to do with that. Is that?
Are you an Obese administrator?
Yes.
Okay, so it's probably for you to distribute. That location manager is unique to a HVS enterprise. So if we've got 10 different enterprises on this call, there would be 10 separate emails. Each location manager is specific to their enterprise. So that is for you to hand out to anyone that's running desktop communicator.
Okay. All right. All right. I think that, yeah, that helps. We don't have a lot of that, but we'll need it for a few people.
Okay.
And that's pretty
Right,
normal. Yeah.
And then John was kind enough to post the link for this presentation and probably the previous one. If you can see it on my screen.
That's correct, David. And what we're going to do is we will keep the kind of most recent. I may keep multiple posted out there, but yeah, that's the URL to get both the presentation and to. It takes about 3 hours to get the WebEx downloaded Prezo to post, so it'll be up there a little bit later today.
And if I may, I'll just add to that, there's a link for user guides and release notes. So you're going to, that's a repository site for several pieces of information. Thank you guys so much for your time today. I'm going to conclude the call now. Again, feel free to join us again on Thursday and reach out to any of your AT&T contact points if you have additional questions, or feel free to email me. I know you have my emails. And I wish you all a good day. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.